For the past few weeks of my life, I have lived and breathed all things Dexter. Having only seen its first season many years prior and never anything beyond that, I randomly decided to jump back in and have ever since been consumed entirely by the show's lore regarding the infamous code that keeps the protagonist in line. I've been infatuated by the likable and deep characters that challenge him, and I've been mystified by the show's complex moral compass, one of which it wasn't afraid to explore, stretch, and weave to an uncomfortable degree. Honestly, I've been completely and utterly just enamored by the show. It's basically all I've been thinking about. And it's been a show that has had me jumping back in on the next episode at every chance I could get. Like, literally any chance I could possibly get. And I can't say that a lot of shows do that. This was a show for me that I think was really special. It had me completely and totally hooked. It's a really fucking good show, at least in my opinion. I just think it suits my tastes really well. Dexter had me on the edge of my seat at times. It had me just wondering what the hell was gonna happen next. And it had me thinking about what was right and wrong. And had me relating to a serial killer, even if he kind of, he sort of has a heart of gold. I honestly think it is one of the best shows out there, even despite where it ended up. Dexter made me feel exhilarated in a way that not many shows have made me feel since, honestly, Breaking Bad. And while BB is still top dog, Dexter has a lot of undeniable similarities to what I consider to be the best TV show ever made. Both had conflicted characters with a dark secret. Both had family member side characters who worked in law enforcement. Both ran from roughly 2006 to 2013. And both were so much funnier than they had any right to be. And also both had very complicated morals. And I know that nowadays the reputation of the show has kind of soured because of the ending and all that stuff, and I completely understand. But I think that there's really no denying that it was definitely a top quality show. And there's absolutely no denying that seasons 1 to 4 were primo Dexter. But I honestly think that it didn't lose its way that much. I know a lot of people think that like the latter half of the series is just complete shit. I disagree, though it definitely does have its problems and it's not as good as the first 4, but we'll get into that in a bit. This is going to be a long ass video. Look, straight up, Dexter is a show that made me excited to be watching quality TV. And I mean throughout its entire run. So that being said, of course, Dexter as a show made me feel kind of defeated too. As a new but strong fan, I took the hits along with the moments of pure gold and the aforementioned weaker end of the series. Sure, Dexter made me excited to keep binging, but by the end it also had me perplexed by its decisions, disappointed by other aspects, and had me really questioning why Hannah McKay was ever a thing to begin with. There's no way around it, Dexter stumbled a little in the end, but I really don't think it was ever as bad as the reviews made them out to be in 2013. Look, and hear me out though, with, in retrospect, with the knowledge that I knew a limited series was going to be continuing the story this year going in, that also kind of changed my perspective for the whole time. Like, I never actually thought this was the definitive ending of Dexter once I got there. I knew that there was going to be more. And so I do think that I had a bit of a different perspective than the people who kind of, watched it fresh, hot off the presses back in 2013. The fact that I knew that a new series was coming out in November kind of softened the blow when it came to weird character decisions and just writing decisions as well. Like, some of the stuff that happens in Dexter is like, why'd you go with that when you could have done these other things? But the fact that I knew it wasn't the definitive ending kind of made me swallow that a bit easier. So while I think it kind of hit me a bit different and I did go in with a different mindset, I will say that I never hated the show at all. And I don't think that it lost its identity, not even in season 8, even if I do think it was a weaker season. But, again, we'll get all into that. We'll talk about season 8, but we'll talk about all the other seasons prior. Let's get into talking about everything. This video is basically going to include every fucking waking thought about Dexter that I've ever had. Maybe that's probably far from true, but I do have quite a lot to get through. So, put on your Hawaiian shirt, head down to Miami and all that shit. Let's talk Dexter. Okay, so I'm going into this video expecting that you've already seen the whole series, just by the way, and that you're familiar with all the aspects. So this isn't going to be one of those videos that starts off by saying Dexter is a 2006 television series that premiered on Showtime and tells the story about the titular character of Dexter Morgan, a moral psychopath who works as a blood spatter analyst for the Miami Police Department, blah, 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 yada, yada. You get it, you know. There will be spoilers ahead. The character of Dexter, to his core, is someone who I think wants to be good. He worries way too much about being a monster for that not to be the case, as his inner monologue takes us along for the ride as it explains to us that Dexter is a unique beast. Inside, Dexter has many layers.
Am I evil? Am I good? I'm done asking those questions. I don't have the answers. Does anyone?
For instance, without a doubt, the most interesting part about Dexter as a character is the fact that he exclusively kills bad people. Already, there is ambiguity in his morals when explained this way. Sticking to taking out only those in the wrong brings meaning to what is happening and begs questions to those who watch. Is killing bad people outside of the law okay? Is vigilanteism justified when killers and criminals slip through the cracks? Does Dexter rid the world of scum, or does he only take away their chances of redemption? Should one man have the power to decide who deserves to live and who deserves to die? The answer's probably no to that, but you know, that's the kind of question that Dexter sets us up with. Many would argue either way though. I can see arguments brimming that condone his actions, as he technically does save people. You know, in a way, he potentially saves hundreds or possibly thousands of potential future victims in killing those that he does. But I can also see arguments against his actions for sure as well, as Dexter's own hypocrisy lingers on the surface, as we question if he's really any better than anybody else who kills. Is Dexter at heart a better person than any of the antagonists from the show? Or do we just see everything from his perspective and kind of get swindled into thinking that everything that he does is okay and, you know, the things that other characters do isn't? Are we being tricked? Is that because this is an unreliable narrator? I think that has a big part to do with the show. And this is what the series begs its viewers to ask themselves. And these are the questions that spring to mind from impartial witnesses behind the safety of a TV screen. Dexter makes us unsure of where we stand because we know that technically he's not in the right. We know that he is somebody who's taking not only the law into his own hands, but people's lives. But we also know that this is fiction playing out. And so when it comes to the moral questions, you know, it's not quite as impactful as making some sort of in real life political opinion. The safety of the TV screen kind of gives us this security to be able to think about what we think is okay in regards to what Dexter is doing. But what makes Dexter as a character so damn compelling is that he doesn't primarily kill for some version of justice. He isn't trying to exact revenge for the most part. He isn't trying to do good, and by all means, Dexter is no hero. He is not the Dark Defender. Dexter, as we know him, isn't on the same level as us in terms of how he views murder. To Dexter, violence comes naturally. It's pure instinct, arguably instigated by a childhood trauma of his as he witnessed his own mother's brutal death at the hands of criminals. Something, by the way, that he really leans into throughout the whole series. I know that witnessing your mother literally be killed by chainsaws and, you know, bathing in her own blood as like a 2-3-year-old or whatever is probably gonna fuck you up, okay? For sure. I'm sure that's definitely a trauma that you're not just gonna get over, okay? That's gonna scar you, I understand. But by the age of like 30, 35, and you're like still excusing that to kill people, I feel like there's more there. There's more reasons that Dexter kills than just that one thing that happened. But that is a part of the argument as well, because he is supposed to be, you know, a psychopath. And psychopaths are typically born, you know, not made via experience. But again, that comes down to an unreliable narrator as well. And that's just another part of Dexter's puzzle that we kind of have to put together and make up our own minds about who he is and why he is how he is. You know, why does Dexter kill? That's more of a complicated question than it sounds like. He definitely doesn't kill for justice. He doesn't kill for that. That's just a nice kind of a little thing that happens by coincidence. Not exactly coincidence, but that's a nice little silver lining.
I search for the ones who think they beat the system. They're not hard to find.
But the point is, Dexter isn't in the killing game for moral reasons, even if he does bring a sense of good intentions with him. Primarily, Dexter kills because he needs to kill. So while his kills do bring some sort of off-the-book justice while he's at it, Dexter does what he does for himself. He kills to feed his own desire. His dark passenger is his drive. And his method is to bring some good out of what he would be doing anyway. Dexter is conflicted between identities here, between that self-titled dark passenger that the public only knows as the Bay Harbor Butcher, and his own self as Dexter Morgan, unassuming self-called lab geek that nobody bats an eye at. Except maybe Doakes. Dexter as a character is at odds with himself, and throughout my watch, I began to come to realize that he is also, as a character, essentially the antithesis to the superheroic comic book original Batman. Where Batman serves his one rule being not to kill, Dexter has to suppress his desire to kill. Where Batman does what he does purely for the right reasons, Dexter's actions just happen to do a little bit of good. And where Batman steps outside of the laws to take down criminals in the wake of his own childhood trauma where his parents both died, well, Dexter's origins are quite similar to that as well, actually. Look, basically Dexter is Batman, you know? Basically Dexter is Bruce Wayne if he wasn't a billionaire and if he lived in Miami, and he had way more of a complicated relationship with murder. Dexter's relationship with murder is where his stepfather Harry's moral code comes in. Once he'd realized that killing was in Dexter's very nature and was inevitable when he'd shown all the telltale signs of what would eventually amount to being a serial killer from a young age, Harry knew there was only so many options in terms of how to handle it. Trying to control Dexter's urges seemed futile, so rather than trying to steer clear and ultimately fail, Harry opted to control the issue at hand by giving him a specific rule set, the two of which are utmost important, being only kill killers and by all means, no matter what, don't get caught. Two rules which often prove to contradict and challenge Dexter in many ways throughout the series. But that's actually kind of the best part of the show, and proves that after 15 years of the show's first premiere that there's still something fundamentally interesting about that question. You know, the show itself kind of brings us into a false sense of security and brings us comfort in what Dexter does, despite the fact that in reality, he's really one fucked up individual. There's no denying that he is still a psychopath, but we root for him as we follow his trials and tribulations on his path to trying to balance his career as a blood spatter analyst, his relationships as a friend, co-worker, boyfriend, turned husband and father, and as well as his nightlife activities in stalking, hunting, and killing his prey as he sees fit. The balance between the conflicting lives Dexter leads brings a certain sense of normalcy to such an abnormal character, and also makes us relate more and more to the character as we watch him commit horrible acts. Like, say Dexter's got to go kill some bad guy tonight, right? But then on the way home, he's got to go pick up a bottle of milk, you know? Hashtag relatable. That's a real example of something that happens in the show, actually. The writing here, with such ridiculous tones and at odds with itself, is really what's to admire here. Again though, particularly also in the early seasons of Dexter, but pretty much all the way throughout as well. Something else that I really like about Dexter, and that goes by often forgotten, is just how fucking hilarious it is. Honestly, Dexter is like the best dark comedy that I've ever seen. The show's dark sense of humor is really where it's at, as we watch the titular character struggle to act like a normal human being in social situations.
Can't let them steal our women now, can we?
No, they're our women.
And conversely feel right at home when he has his next victim on his table. There's also a lot of irony and double entendres that never get old, as Dexter references how some normal situation that everybody goes through parallels with some murderous acts as we listen to his narration judge many aspects of his life in humorous ways. I absolutely love the voiceover usage throughout the series, and fundamentally is actually something I really do love about the show. I was even thinking about this while watching. I've seen a lot of people complain about voiceover narration used in other movies and shows as being an example of screenwriters being lazy. Voiceover is often looked at as being a tool that focuses on telling rather than showing in a predominantly visual format, which is looked down upon. People criticize the usage of things like this because it can often spoon feed viewers and be used as an easy storytelling tactic to manipulate audiences. And I get that, I understand the hesitancy to like it, but for me, I absolutely love getting to hear the character's thoughts as he experiences the everyday, as well as the not so everyday day-to-day experiences that the character experiences every day. Dexter's inner monologue brings personality to the show and makes it so much more entertaining to me. Like, for example, you could just have Dexter staring blankly into the distance and leave the audience to guess the scene's intention, or Dexter could just outright tell us what's going on in a way that not only exposits story, but also gives us insight into who he is as a person. Personally, I think the voiceover narration in Dexter adds so much personality, and I think that it would be a much drier show without it. It would still probably be good, but I don't think it would quite hit me in the same way. The narration can be used for emotional moments, it can be used for humor, or even just to bring us closer to the character and story overall. It can make us kind of understand Dexter as a psychopath better, and it just, I think it's good. I think it's unique. I know that a lot of shows do use voiceover narration in a lazy way. I don't think that Dexter does. I don't think that it is a sign of the show selling out in a way. And I don't think that it ever makes the show feel dumbed down. Honestly, Dexter's inner monologue makes the show, if you ask me. And it just wouldn't be the same without it. There's also the element to Dexter's character that pulls from addiction as being part of his weakness. Arguably, he is addicted to killing, much like a drug addict would be to their chosen vice. The show actually chooses to go down this route a couple times, using rehabilitation as an allegory in both seasons 2 and 7, with Rita believing Dexter is a drug addict early on, and Dexter stumbling into agreement as he has to hide his much worse secret of murdering. Kind of like the lie that Walter White has to tell in the early seasons of Breaking Bad, where he tells everybody he's been gambling, rather than admitting that he's been making meth. Another parallel to Breaking Bad. Anyway, and then this theme is also later explored in season 7, after Deb finds out the dark truth about Dexter and desperately tries to find the humanity in him, and kind of has to rationalize a way of explaining it to herself. So she's like, it's an addiction and we can solve it. She's a fixer and she is really just trying so hard to save her brother. And I really do like this element. I find it interesting. And Dexter himself even jumps into this kind of addiction theory himself, trying numerous times to not kill anybody and going for stretches where he doesn't, before ultimately getting pulled back into needing to for his own thirst for blood or his loved one's safety. Villains of the series brings Dexter a reason to kill and almost justifies his actions, since there's also always a bigger bad out there. And then once Dexter takes them out, we often jump back into the status quo once more. Ironically being something that I criticized the show for myself throughout, being that it's one that has a dramatic format that naturally should develop and evolve, but Dexter loves jumping back into the routine of seasons past. And look, while I never wanted Dexter as a character to stop killing people, because come on, this is a show about killing people, I did want him to grow and evolve as a character. And look, in many ways he did, but in some ways he did often just revert back to the version of himself that we were so familiar with. And I do feel like later seasons of Dexter did begin to rehash treaded ground, and you know, it kind of got comfortable with where it was, and it didn't want to change things up quite too much. In a lot of ways it did change things up, but in a lot of ways it also kept everything kind of the same. You know, by like season 5 and 6 you really begin to start to see the formula play out, and you kind of can guess where the show is going in certain ways. This also, just by the way, brings me to while on the air, Dexter was a daring, risk-taking show, until it kind of wasn't in some ways. The first season opened with a bang, setting the entire tone for what the rest of the show would be. Dexter was down pat from the start, introducing us to its titular character well, and already having a fundamental understanding of who and what Dexter himself was from the start. The rest of this first season played out more like a mystery than future seasons would, keeping us guessing as to who the main villain of the series thus far was in the Ice Truck Killer, aka who we find out to be was Rudy, aka Brian Moser, who late into the season we learned to be Dexter's biological brother. The dynamic between the two is an interesting one, as we witness the Ice Truck Killer take an interest in Dexter. He's more interested in him rather than anything else at all. And this is an interesting season to watch back on in retrospect, having known all the details going in. You kind of see all the clues and everything. I will say though, going back to watching the first season after having seen all of the others, which I did by the way, I will say that there are some moments in here that are kind of weird and funny in retrospect. Like the fact that Maria LaGuerta kind of keeps flirting with Dexter in the first season, which is super awkward and weird when you know where the characters end up later on. Like, that is not their dynamic at all. I don't know what you were trying to do in the first season, guys, but that wasn't right. I mean, there's nothing technically wrong with it, but it was just odd for their characters. And then there are other small details that don't perfectly line up, I feel like. Like when Dexter killed his first victim, and then how long it was till Harry killed himself because of it. Because later seasons kind of tell you that when he finds out that Harry killed himself in season 2, they kind of make it sound like Harry killed himself like instantly, like straight away, like 2 days after or whatever. Once he'd find out that Dexter was a killer and he couldn't handle the monster that he'd created. But in season 1, early on in season 1, there is this nurse who is fucking with people's medicine and whatever and killing people this way. And they find out and Dexter kills this nurse. And then we find out that he kind of saved Harry from that nurse and he lives on for another year. And we don't know at that point that he eventually killed himself. So when exactly, like how long did it take? I'm not exactly sure. There are some issues like that, but it's not that big of a deal. The rest of the series would go on to further adapt everything, of course, but the first really did handle its setup well, as it balanced everything with sufficient character drama in terms of the Miami Metro characters. Like Doakes with his complications with fellow police officers and people from his past, and Batista getting divorced, which is probably not something a lot of people care too much about, but still. And Rita's junkie ex-husband who's constantly causing problems. These aren't the most memorable aspects of the show by far, but I do appreciate the efforts and everything regarding it all. And that's all established here. Most impressively to me about season 1 though, is that as I've said, I do think that the show is a great dark comedy, but that sense of humor, that wild sense of humor was there from the get-go, as it balanced its own, contrasting bleakness that the show also explores constantly as well. Season 2 of Dexter had me extremely captivated, with Doakes and Frank Lundy hot on the Bay Harbor Butcher's trail, and with Miami Metro having found all of Dexter's previous victims' bodies, Dexter Morgan was sure to be found out soon. And I was all in for it, reeling to find out what was going to happen next. The stakes were raised and the show was still so early in that I was honestly shocked that the show was willing to go down this deep into the storyline this quickly. Then by the third act of this season, James Doakes and Dexter Morgan are kind of facing off as he's got Doakes in the cage and everything. And Dexter's kind of challenged. He's not sure what to do with Doakes because there's like definitely this conflict there where he doesn't want to kill him. But, Doakes knows. What the fuck is he gonna do next? Letting Doakes go would forever change Dexter's life, as Doakes knows the truth and will bring him to justice if let go. But at the same time, Dexter doesn't want to kill him. Not because he cares about him, but because that would be going against the code, and would potentially lead him down a dangerous path that might only exacerbate his bloodthirst. And so what Dexter does to try and make this decision is to just actually talk to Doakes. And we get these actual real moments between the two characters really speaking to each other about what Dexter should do. And the actual grounded conversations between the two guys, man to man, as they speak honestly and openly, is actually weirdly touching. There's something nice about Dexter's kind of openness where he is able to actually speak about what he does to somebody who isn't another psychopath. There's something about these conversations where there's obviously this weird mutual respect between them two, kind of, even though they are pure enemies. But this also exposes another aspect to Dexter as a character as well. There's something that I really like about this theme where Dexter can speak most candidly to his own victims rather than anybody in his own personal life. There's something that Dexter does here where it's kind of like his own therapy sessions where he talks to these people who he then kills. Because with so few people left alive who actually know about Dexter's truth, he's lonely.
Which is why
Doakes actually nearly convinces Dexter to turn himself in at one point. Because at this point, Dexter is feeling quite insecure and he has this very conflicted feeling about his own morals and everything. So he's in this kind of fragile state. So when Doakes talks to him man to man and really actually speaks to him with respect, Dexter really nearly does get convinced until something, something interrupts this. I don't remember exactly what it was, but there's this kind of tragic moment where Doakes really got so damn close, but you knew once that moment kind of ended that is not the route that the show was going to take. Logically, the only way out, at least for the show to keep going, was that Doakes had to die. That was just the case. Doakes had to die. But still, they sat there thinking, no, they couldn't possibly kill Doakes already. Not now. He's a fan favorite. I love this guy. don't kill him now. Doakes was such an integral part to those first 2 seasons and played as both a main character and essentially the main antagonist against Dexter up until that point. But Doakes had been suspicious of Dexter for a long time, routinely tailing him on the daily, and it was clear that something would either have to convince him otherwise or that, yeah, he wouldn't survive. The part that made his death that much more shocking though was that not only did Doakes play such a big part of the series, but he was just also so damn likable.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Like, goddamn, Doakes is the real MVP of this show, even though he was only in 2 of 8 seasons. He left such a memorable impact that he is just by far one of the best aspects of the show, one of the most memorable characters. The dynamic between Dexter and Doakes is honestly iconic. It's one for the ages, as, you know, he was suspicious of him the whole time, and obviously we know that there is a dark secret going on with Dexter. So the tension was always there. But it was also used for comedy throughout as well, as like, I absolutely love the scenes where Doakes was like suspicious and like freaked out by Dexter, and he'd say something like, "Morgan, you're some fucking sick freak." And then Dexter would be like, "Okay, I don't know what you're talking about, sorry." It's like, it's just the best part of the whole show, honestly.
You give me a creep, you know that, Dexter?
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that.
And their iconic rivalry is honestly something that gave the show much of its identity in the first early couple seasons, before obviously squaring off in that final couple episodes of season 2. And honestly, it's here at the end of season 2 where I think that Dexter potentially could have just ended as a series, and I would have left satisfied. We'd also need some slightly different details about some things about it though, that I do want to get into. For one, the show kind of excuses Dexter entirely and parts with his moral question as to what to do about Doakes anyway by allowing Lila to kill him. Thus, Dexter never has to break his precious little code and gets away with everything anyway, without having to pay for it in some way. This decision kind of sucked. Doakes was maybe my favorite character, and he was taken out by Lila, probably my least favorite character. I think that Doakes deserved better, and I think that the show could have had more to say with whatever Dexter's ultimate decision would have been, which I think we all know would have been to kill Doakes. But whatever the details were, in the end, Dexter as a show did kill Doakes off. And I respect it. I was sad to see Doakes go, but it was a logical part in the story where that's kind of what had to happen. And I respect that the show kind of had enough self-awareness to know that and to follow through. It kind of reminds me of when Shane dies in The Walking Dead in season 2. Yeah, I know, that's a long time ago. If you're not a big Walking Dead fan, you probably forgot who that was a long time ago. But that is the guy who John Bernthal plays in the first 2 seasons. And Rick and Shane's rivalry was the best thing in The Walking Dead, and it was never the same once that character was gone. I'm an unapologetic fan of that character, who a lot of people really don't like, but I hate him too. Like, he's such a scumbag, but that's what's so good about the character. Anyway, it kind of reminds me of that. To see Doakes go was kind of something that would fundamentally change Dexter as a show entirely, because it was just such a big part of the show. And so, yeah, I was definitely worried at the end of season 2 for where it would go from there. But luckily, Dexter did continue to be great. Doakes did leave an absence for sure, but I do think it's a great show, with or without him. On the other hand, still talking about season 2, another big gripe that I do have with it is when, even though they weren't actually together anymore, I understand, but I hate when Dexter sleeps with Lila. I really don't like that. It's not technically cheating. Him and Rita were not together anymore, but it feels like cheating. And it's just weird, especially after the season 1, where Dexter's whole storyline about being basically asexual, and Rita also at least temporarily being asexual because of her trauma and everything. Like, there was a big element to their relationship. They were both uncomfortable with that. And then they kind of grew as characters together and kind of made each other comfortable with the idea of that. And then, you know, once you get into season 2 and it's just sleeping with somebody else because they broke up for 5 minutes, it's really a dick move on Dexter. And like, I know, Dexter's a fucking murderer. It's far from the worst thing that he's done. But just to me, I don't know, it's just a bit icky. And also, I don't like Lila as a character. She's a very manipulative character. I understand that's like on purpose because she's essentially the villain. But I don't know, she annoys me. And in comparison, Rita is just such a good person who has never done anything wrong ever. She's just like this nice, what's the word? Like compassionate, I suppose. Just innocent. She's an innocent soul. And she deserved better. Season 3 had Dexter make a friend in the killing game for the first time as it introduced Miguel Prado onto the scene. After being caught in the act of killing somebody, Dexter and Miguel soon come to an understanding as to what he was doing. At first, Miguel assumed that this was an out-of-character act of passion, but he saw value in it, making him want to build up on the idea, before soon realizing that this wasn't Dexter's first rodeo, but still wanting to team up with him and contribute in basically taking down the corrupt system one man at a time, before leaning a little too hard into the judge, jury, and executioner role. A lot of the tension this season definitely came from their relationship and how much of that Miguel would sabotage. He was a really well-written character and his motivations were understandable until he lost all rationale. This made him a great foe to Dexter as he kind of paralleled with him, as his first reasons for killing were purely for justice and not for the joy of the kill, until he got too passionate about it, and it kind of reflects Dexter in that way. To me, Miguel is probably the second best villain of the whole series.
I am the last person you want to fuck with, because I will fuck you back!
The third season explored Dexter's moral ambiguity that much more, but a lot of the main focus in terms of character drama was based on Rita's impending pregnancy and Dexter's concerns for how he'd affect his offspring. A reoccurring theme throughout the entire series, as Harrison's born between seasons after 3. Season 4 is arguably the best season, and that's not exactly a hot take. I really can't say I have any problems with this season. It opens strongly with possibly my very favourite couple episodes, in particular the second episode remains to be seen. That's the one where Dexter finds himself in a catastrophic car accident directly after taking somebody out, so now seemingly with the body in the back and a slew of evidence leading his way, he has to chase his own tail to cover everything up before anybody finds out. It's an episode that absolutely does not let up for a second. This season also introduces us to Daddy Dexter. Now with a baby to look after, Dexter tries to balance family life and also his off-beaten hobby, all while trying to also look like a normal human being and have his own career and everything, and wavering his own sanity and health while he does all this as well. There's a lot of comedy to be found here as well, in terms of Dexter struggling to kill people while he also has dad duties to take care of. But that isn't exactly the aspect of the show that I really want to talk about when it comes to season 4. What I want to talk about with season 4, you all know it, it's the ending. It's the finale. Another example of the show showing bravery in terms of taking risks, as the earlier seasons all tended to, is of course the ending of season 4. Season 4, episode 12's ending might as well be the end of the series as far as big fans of the show are concerned. It told the story fully, the showrunners left, and it circled back to Dexter's origins as well, with his newborn found in the blood of his mother's dead body, exactly like Dexter had been found as a child years prior. And it was Dexter's fault. If he hadn't entangled himself in the life of Arthur Mitchell, aka the Trinity Killer, or if he'd killed him during the many chances he had prior throughout season 4, the ultimate tragic ending of season 4 would have never occurred. And that's what stings so damn much about it. Dexter honestly could have stopped Rita's eventual and untimely death, but he didn't. And I think that's what makes it feel so real and hard-hitting. Much like in real life, when things go tragically wrong, many are prone to thinking about their every decision that led up to that point. Dexter had so many opportunities to take Trinity out, but played with fire instead, and it caused collateral damage that I as a viewer honestly, surprisingly, never actually expected. Like, look, there was always the threat of Dexter's loved ones, getting killed. That was always kind of on the cards and everything. That was always a threat that would always happen. And, it was part of the discussion for sure. You were expecting some sort of tragedy to happen at some point. But I truly wasn't expecting Rita's death right then and there. I was not ready for it at all. The moment that Dexter triumphantly returns home after killing Trinity with the plans on meeting up with her for their small little weekend getaway that they were having. But then hears baby Harrison's cries as he enters the home. You know straight away that something's wrong. Harrison shouldn't be there. She was going to take him there to the keys with her. And so when you hear that, it's like, what's going on? Rita's here? That's not what she last said on that message that Dexter just listened to, as she explained that she was catching that slightly later flight and they would see each other soon. So when you hear those cries, oh man. I was honestly in total shock. I knew where this was headed, and I was dreading where it was headed. I didn't want Dexter to walk through that house. I didn't want him to get to what he was about to see. I knew what it meant, and I was still sitting there just shocked. The moment Dexter walks into the bathroom had my heart fucking sink. Like seriously, it was more shocking than any of the Game of Thrones deaths to me by far. It was more shocking than just about any death in any piece of media I've ever seen. Barring maybe, except for a certain death in Hereditary, to be honest. Rita's death in Dexter season 4 fucking broke me. And I had to stop for a moment when the episode ended to just catch my breath. Something that was kind of out of character for me at the time, where I was just binging through, just consuming each next episode at such a high rate. But yeah, with this one, I just stopped. I was just fucked. I had to stop and think seriously about what the show would be like from here on out. Rita and Dexter's relationship with her was such an integral part of it. It was what grounded him and what brought stakes to his life and the show. And it also made Dexter more human. Rita was one of the few people that I think Dexter truly actually loved. And so when she died, I just felt so bad for him. Look, I know that Dexter says throughout the series that he is not human and that he has no feelings, but honestly, I don't really buy that. I don't buy that he doesn't care about certain things. I think that ultimately Dexter loved and cared about quite a lot of people, but was kind of in denial about it. I guess ultimately I'm saying that I don't think Dexter is a straight up psychopath like he tells us he is. At least not in the traditional sense anyway. He loves Deb, he loved Rita for sure, he loves Harrison, he apparently loves Hannah McKay, he looked up to Harry, he loves Cody and Asta, and you know, I think there is way too much heart in Dexter for him to be completely emotionless like he says he is. I think that he definitely has some sort of issues up there in the old noggin. But I do think that he has a lot of things that he definitely does care about and is concerned for. Another aspect, just by the way, first before I get to the next part, that I found hilarious was when he had to tell Cody and Asta about Rita's death. And like, it was so tragic, but they had just come home from Disney World and they've got their Mickey Mouse ears and everything. They walk in the apartment all just smiling. You know, it's the best time of their life. They put the Mickey Mouse ears on Dexter and he has to tell them that their own mother died. And it's like just the most sick sense of humor ever. It's so, oh my God, it's depressing as fuck, but it's just ingenious writing. Fantastic black comedy writing. Rita and Doakes' death, as well as having the Bay Harbor Butcher being hunted by the police and moments like these, proved that Dexter was a show that was constantly willing to be taking risks during those first few years. Dexter, when it started out, was daring, a series that wouldn't fall under the same trap of a lot of TV at the time being procedurally focused and doing the same shit every single episode. Dexter instead stuck to 12 episodes a season when the standard at the time was more like 22, and it always remained willing to change things up. Like for instance, even when it comes down to the locations. Sure, the Miami Metro Police Station and Dexter's apartment were frequent locations that the show was set in, but it would also always be willing to go to new locations and places we hadn't seen before, as well as being a show that was willing to have a ton of blood and guts and swears coming from every episode as well. Dexter was honestly one of the early adapters of the golden era of TV, following the likes of The Sopranos and possibly inspiring greatness to come from shows like Breaking Bad and other prestigious TV of the 2010s. But as the series kept going, it kind of kept letting Dexter get away with things when I don't think he should have in exactly the way he did. Like suspicious people would get thrown off course just by coincidence. Characters would end up trusting Dexter once more, even after finding pretty damning evidence, like the time Quinn was shown a picture of Dexter getting rid of bodies and then kind of just forgetting about it. Dexter was a trailblazing show at one point, but it began to start copying itself, and it began to stop taking the big risks and opted to focus more on the killer of the season plotlines, rather than ever changing the status quo between Dexter and his reputation at Miami Metro. Right down to the bitter end, we never got to see Angel Batista or Vince Masuka find out about Dexter's extracurricular activities, which was extremely disappointing. Never did the show delve into a season of Dexter on the run. He was never found out, which in my opinion was an odd decision. Another issue with the show's quality come later seasons was that it did lose its way because it kept doing the same thing. It always seemed like somebody would find out about Dexter at one point, and then either they would accept him and kind of act as like a kind of apprentice, or they would not accept him and eventually be killed. On the other hand, it always seemed like the main antagonist would go through similar formats too. They'd be set up and predictably taken down by the end of the season. The show had formed a pattern, and it was becoming clear where a season's arc would be going in. The show was becoming a little more predictable at this point, at least when it comes to guest appearances. Dexter was forming a pattern in having speaking, characters last for one season at a time, giving watchers a pretty good guess at how seasons would turn out early on. Also, at this point in Dexter, I gotta say that it kind of started feeling like everybody and their mum was a killer as well. Like, you couldn't turn a corner and not have somebody be murdered. And look, I know that the whole reputation for Florida and everything, the Florida man does this and whatever, like shit goes down in Florida or whatever. But come on, to this extent, I really don't think so. Even if the crime rate is only like 20% solved or whatever it is that they say. Some say season 5 is where it all went wrong and was the beginning of the end. And look, I get it. After a phenomenal season that was 4, which focused on easily the best antagonist of the show, 5 really had a tough act to follow, but if you ask me, did so with grace. Season 5 is where we are introduced to another partnership dynamic, this time in what would soon become a sort of love interest for our main character too, in Lumen. Apparently that's her first name as well. Like, when I was watching through, I thought I missed something where they kind of said her full name. I always thought they were just calling her Lumen, like, as in that's her last name. like her name was like something like Lindsay Lumen or something, you know, some shit like that. But apparently no, her name is Lumen Pierce. It's Pierce. Fuck me, I guess Lumen is her first name. Kind of weird. Anyway, Lumen served once again to give Dexter somebody to play off in the absence of Rita and Miguel of seasons past. And in my opinion, the show did a pretty good job with this character who played as Dexter's literal partner in crime. It was a pretty surprisingly great fit, which was why it was so weird when she kind of just dipped out at the end of the season, never to be seen or heard from again. This is one of the telltale signs of the later seasons and their forms of misjudgment and lack of planning ahead. They ran the character's course and then she was just like, bye! While she was there though, I enjoyed it. Season 5's general plot was about Jordan Chase and the Barrel Girl gang and exacting revenge on these horrible, horrible people. Lumen being one of their victims who actually survived, a rarity when it comes to these people. This did bring emotional stakes to all of the kills and set up an interesting comparison between Dexter and Lumen in that she was only there for emotional reasons. And so when it came to killing people, she had nowhere to progress from there. So when the job was done, as was she, Jordan Chase was her endgame, and after that she really had nowhere else to go. And so I actually, thinking about it that way, don't mind that she doesn't have the heart to continue and does just kind of leave the murder game and exit the show promptly, because that does actually make some sense in that regard. But leaving without much of a mention ever again did feel a little bit hollow, if you ask me. For the most part though, I found season 5 to be really great still, as it explored Dexter's dealing with grief about Rita in the specific way that he could experience something like that, which balanced both the tragic side of that, yet at the same time kept Dexter in character. We saw that he didn't quite know how to feel in some moments, and in some moments it felt like he didn't even care because he was moving on to the next thing. You know, being the psychopath that he may or may not be, Dexter is somebody who will give himself an objective and move on. But he does definitely have moments of pure grief in there too, and it's great to see how far the character has come. Season 5 to me still felt like quality television, even if a little bit less focused. Season 6 though is probably my least favorite season. Honestly, I still like it. I think it's not terrible. I think it's still good. I really don't think there is an absolute, just outright bad season of Dexter. I think they're all good, but I do literally give no fucks about certain aspects, like especially when it comes to season 6's main antagonist in the form of Colin Hanks' Travis Marshall, aka the Doomsday Killer. This dude is not interesting. Apart from having some interesting looking murder victims akin to what Hannibal would later excel at in 2013, the Doomsday Killer for the most part is just boring, with a very predictable late season twist in that he was fight clubbing it the entire time. Dun dun dun! Look, maybe it's the religious theme, but something about this season and this villain didn't quite hit me the same way as seasons prior. But I was never straight up just completely disappointed. I still thought there were strong elements to this season as well. Season 6 though is also known for having some of the weaker episodes of the total 96 as well. Episode 7, titled Nebraska, for example, is an infamous one for being many people's least favorite episode. I honestly don't mind it that much myself though. I don't think it's straight up a bad episode. I think it's okay. It kind of explores a loose thread that was left from season 4, and I find it sort of interesting. Kind of a throwback episode. Look, maybe it does feel a bit like a filler episode. I will definitely say that. It's kind of an unnecessary one. If you're watching this show, you can probably just skip it if you want. But I don't know, it was more Dexter and I was happy to see more Dexter. What season 6 did deliver us on too, though, was a fantastic finale, leaving us with arguably the second most shocking moment in the series, rivaling Rita's death, and that was when Deb caught Dexter in the act as he is in the middle of taking the aforementioned Doomsday Killer out. It was inevitable that this was going to happen at some point, that Dexter was going to find him out. After a close call at the end of season 5, where Deborah let the unknown assailants who we knew to be Dex and Lumen go, it was only a matter of time that the writers would bring her in on it. And I actually find where they do go with the storyline really interesting too. Dexter as a show had done it again and once more returned to risky storytelling. This would surely change the dynamic of the show from here on out, and it's what we'd all been waiting to see for a long time. For one of the main characters of the series to find out the truth and not be killed straight away like Doakes. Deborah Morgan is having a straight up bad time for the last 2 seasons of Dexter, but she does end up kind of going along for the ride and forgives Dexter quicker than I'd have liked to see. When she does though, it does bring an interesting new set of storylines for her character to go in, and I do empathize with her desperately grasping for the humanity that she wants to see in Dexter, but that maybe isn't there. I think that what hits so hard about Deborah's downfall come the last 2 seasons is that she was always a character that had good intentions going into everything that she ever did. She's probably my favorite character, barring Dexter himself and Doakes. Deborah was the character that I possibly related to most though. Deborah was a character who wasn't afraid to speak her mind, sometimes to her own detriment. She's a character with a bad habit for swearing. Definitely have that in common with her. Although I take that back, not a bad habit for swearing, because there's nothing wrong with swearing, they're just words. A habit for swearing. And she's a character who constantly questions authority and doesn't care for the ultra fake professionalism of many people that do in her career. Deborah is true to her word and sticks to her guns to keep doing what she thinks is right no matter what. She's probably the most morally good character in the entire series up until she finds out about Dexter's truth, which dramatically challenges her. The new villain for this season though was Isaac Serco and the Koshka Brotherhood gang. And if you thought that the Doomsday Killer was an uninteresting villain, boy howdy, you got something coming. Look, I for the most part can get behind the villains of each season to an extent. And this guy in season 7 had a bit of fun left in him, I guess. But in comparison to characters like Trinity, it can be pretty rough pretending that these fairly forgettable mafia characters even hold a candle at all. Fuck, they barely hold an iPhone flashlight, let alone a candle. But really, if we're being honest, Isaac and his cronies are kind of the B-plot characters here. The real big character introduction for season 7, if we're being honest, is the controversial Hannah McKay. Being one of the most disliked characters on the entire show, Hannah, kind of funnily enough, plays yet again another love interest to Dexter. Something that I argue was never needed after Rita, even Lumen, even though I liked that character, but still. I do think that Dexter works well not with a love interest. He worked well with Rita as trying to be a family man, but from then on out, I really don't think that what he needed was a love interest in terms of the writing, but the show kind of kept taking stabs at it anyway. And here we go, we get Hannah McKay in season 7. Credit where it's due though, Hannah is a somewhat interesting character with similar interests in murder to Dexter. I do kind of like their interaction in terms of this dark, dangerous romance that they know is probably bad for both of them. And I do actually like the conflict she brings within Dexter regarding his feelings towards her. I feel like that he is yet again another character who can accept him for who he truly is. Something that the show, by the way, keeps telling me is a rarity and nobody ever finds out, but somebody kind of finds out every single season of Dexter. It kind of happens quite a lot, dude. You gotta, you know, keep it packed tighter. It's okay though, I forgive it because I really like this aspect of the show. Like the dynamic between the characters who do find out about Dexter pretty much every season is something I enjoy. So like, I don't want that to go away necessarily, but I do find it funny that, like, he acts like, oh my god, finally, I found somebody who understands me. I can be myself with them. And it feels like he's saying this every fucking second episode. But the fact that Dexter can be open towards Hannah does make me kind of understand why he would have feelings for her. But what I don't like so much about her character's inclusion is that whenever Dexter is around Hannah, he begins to act totally out of character. Dexter just crumbles at her every appearance as his own rational thinking jumps out the window whenever she's around. Honestly, I think that there's something kind of pathetic about Dexter when he's around Hannah, and it's not that believable to me. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think Dexter has to be perfect in every single way at all times and has to be better than everybody. It's good when characters have flaws, and I do like when Dexter fucks up, it only brings more tension to the show. Like in season 2 when Masuka finds the moss on some of the victims that
Dexter
has left in the ocean and whatever. And that strings right back to the dock that he keeps his slice of life boat at. And he didn't realize that. He didn't have the foresight about the moss. That's an overlook that he didn't think about that in any sense. That's a fuck up on his part. And I do like that. That's a good thing for him to fuck up on, because why would he think about the moss? Why would he know about that? That's a good kind of gap in his knowledge there. But I don't necessarily think that the gaps in his rational thinking and his own character motivations should be compromised just when it comes to this one character. Like Dexter, I feel like, is this ultimate mastermind, this great foe who, like, against the police and everything, until he finds a girl pretty, and then he's just like, I'm an idiot now. It's just kind of annoying. When it comes down to it, Dexter, in the presence of Hannah, doesn't just make a few bad judgment calls. Dexter's a straight up buffoon around her. Anyway, the season ends when he comes to his senses and realizes he needs to get rid of Hannah, but refuses to kill her because of his feelings for her, which was an element that I found myself empathizing with. He chose not to kill her, but to send her away in prison because he loved her too much. It's kind of this nice little tragic moment for the character, and I actually do like this as an ending for Hannah, which we all know ends up not being the ending for Hannah. We'll get to that soon. But let's jump back to Deborah and her side of Season 7's ending for a sec. The end of Episode 12 leaves Deborah in a predicament between her two psyches. There's the loving, sisterly side who'd always protect Dexter up until this point, going as far into becoming an accomplice for his dark crimes. Then there's the professional side that has always kept the moral high ground and taking personal risks to do what she thought was right, like constantly calling LaGuardia out on her bullshit throughout the series, for example. Funnily enough though, this of course is who is on the opposing side of Dexter here. The two stand on either side of shipping container with Dexter's guilt exposed. Here Deborah is given a choice to hand him in for arguably the common good, or to continue on the reckless path of defending him. Ultimately, Deborah decides to shoot LaGuardia herself, which honestly, to be honest, was probably unnecessary. She probably could have just left Dexter to kill her. But regardless, when this did happen, I was struck in the heart once more, like I did at the end of Season 4. It was just such a tragic moment to see Deborah sell herself out here and do the wrong thing. And ultimately, this was something that was definitely going to come back in terms of guilt. And I just felt so bad for her. I knew that this was not the right decision for her to make. This is possibly my second favorite season closer. As when you're watching for the first time, you're just left to wonder, what the fuck happens next? Mainly, I was just left in awe as to how Deborah was going to handle this. She was already having a bad time as it was, just knowing about Dexter's murders throughout Season 7. But now she has partaken. Now she's gone too far down the rabbit hole to ever return from. And it's a situation that the character never deserved to be in, because she was just such a morally good character. And this was a decision that she should have never had to have made. It's Dexter's fault. And I do find that kind of tragic for her when it comes to this and the final season, because she does exactly what I expected, and she handles it terribly. Cutting herself from everyone Deborah knows, including and especially Dexter himself, she leaves the force to follow some private investigating gig that honestly felt beneath her. She'd hit rock bottom here, and the first third or so of Season 8 sees her as a total wreck. And at one point she even comes close to drunkenly outing her and her brother out to the police because of her incredible guilt. I found it compelling to see her crumble under the pressure due to Dexter's actions, but at the same time feel bad for her in a way, because it was also her own doing once she'd found out the truth. And the path that she had led since became her downfall. And it's so tragic because up until this point, Deb was the one that probably deserved the best in the whole damn series. Like, I sat there during Season 8 and said to myself, please, do whatever you want with anybody. Any of the characters, kill them, whatever, I don't care. Just let Deborah survive. Let her come out of this alive, please. But I had a sneaking suspicion that she wouldn't. The rest of Season 8 follows a weird kind of out-of-nowhere plot that revolves around a mystery psychiatrist from Dexter's past who helped form Harry's code for Dexter as a child, and her own serial killer son, Oliver Saxon, aka the brain surgeon. While the other side of Season 8 decides to bring Hannah McKay back after her imprisonment at the end of the previous season. Assuming that we'd never see her again, it was a surprise that she had returned, but it wasn't exactly a welcome one. And the show here, particularly as well in Season 8, also really wants us to forgive and forget about Hannah's actions, even going as far as to having Deborah herself embrace her and even share a meal with her. Which, come on. But like it or not, Hannah is back. And as the season progresses from here, it is about her and Dexter's abrupt exit to Argentina. Dexter has to take out the brain surgeon first though, for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why. I guess maybe it's because he's a compulsive killer and for protecting those around him since he knows Dexter's identity. But it just never felt like Dexter absolutely had to take this guy out. Not to the same urgent degree of killers past like the Trinity Killer anyway. But I buy it enough, that's fine, whatever. It adds a ticking clock to the season. As PI, Jacob Elway etches his way closer to catching Hannah, and as an impending hurricane is headed Miami's way, rendering the need to catch a flight out of there properly crucial. I get why they add these elements to raise the tension, and I bought it for the most part, but I can also see from a writing perspective that these are kind of empty attempts of inserting stakes at the season's story that really didn't feel that weighty otherwise. This was just a way to make Season 8 feel more climactic than it really was, I think, in terms of plot anyway. See, because I think everybody's problem with Season 8 and the ending of the show itself revolves heavily around the issue that Season 8 itself doesn't feel climactic. Its biggest downfall is that it just feels like another season, rather than this big epic climactic ending that brings everything to a close. Rather than Dexter facing off against those he's worked with for years and heartbreaking moments of betrayal coming to light left, right and center, the season instead chose for Dexter to fight yet another random serial killer. Who's the brain surgeon? Who cares? It just felt like a cop-out when the show always felt like it was headed in a certain direction that would eventually lead to characters like Batista and Quinn finding out. The big question would be, would Dexter get away with it in the end? Dexter often mentioned throughout the show that serial killers usually get caught at one point or another, and that he never really had much of an exit strategy, apart from just keeping on doing what he was doing for as long as he could, and survive how he knew via the code. So yeah, rather than giving us personal conflicts like these, the show just introduced us to the equivalent of foes that Dexter had faced before. The brain surgeon is no more or less intimidating or personally significant than any of the killers throughout the entire series. Hell, even side killers in the series, like Season 7's Ray Speltzer, he was more memorable to me by far. This was the Jason Voorhees type guy who had his house set up like some fucked up maze, and he wore like a Minotaur mask with horns on it as he was killing his victims. You know, that dude definitely left an impact. The brain surgeon, not so much. Other more memorable killers from the series include Walter Kenny, aka the Tooth Fairy killer of Season 6, Zoe Kruger, the policewoman killer in Season 4, Emmett Meridian, the manipulative psychiatrist of Season 1, and or even Little Cheeto of Season 2. These are all way more memorable to me than the brain surgeon, who left basically no impact. And that's what kind of shits me about him, because he makes such a big impact to the characters, but as a character, he's just this insert into the final ending of Season 8. He's nobody, but now he's just there and he's playing such a big part for where the characters will end up, and it just feels, I don't know, empty. Now I feel like I'm being kind of harsh though. I think summed up, Season 8 as a whole is a perfectly fine season. I think it's okay. It's not as good as previous seasons, but honestly, on a quality standpoint, we're still looking at some pretty great TV here if we isolate it and it doesn't act as the ending of the show. I may or may not personally like some decisions made, but Season 8 as a season standing alone is not that bad. It's just that it's a bad send-off. Rather than feeling like this was the ultimate ending that just had to be the ending, it more so just felt like the showrunners were like, I don't know, we've done this for 8 years, I guess we'll finish it now? Like, I just think that the pacing between Season 7 and 8 and the actual ending was just off, and really Dexter could have used another season where Miami Metro found out, and all this kind of stuff like that. Deborah may or may not get killed in Season 8, that's up to you, that's up to the writers and whatever. I would prefer it not to happen, but I will accept whatever does happen as canon, if it feels like an actual ending anyway. I just think that Season 8 just doesn't feel like an ending. It just doesn't feel like an ending, that's the problem. But because New Blood is coming out, maybe that's not such a bad thing. I guess we will find out. But let's get to talking about the very details of the ending, shall we? Look, first up, Deborah deserved better. If you're going to kill Deb off, at least do it while she has autonomy and dignity. Have her fight for it. The way Deborah is killed feels rushed and strange. For being the character with arguably the most personality in the series in terms of always saying what she thinks and being a loudmouth, it's so bizarre that she is killed while unconscious. Worse than that though is that it's completely Dexter's fault, which I know is kind of the point, but the whole deciding not to kill the brain surgeon and letting him get arrested instead is something that felt a bit annoying. Like, we'd spent all season chasing this guy down, and now Dexter decides to do this? But like, fine, whatever, I get it. He's turning a new leaf, I get it. The whole show was about Dexter trying to regain some form of humanity, and some of the series focused on Dexter trying not to kill people too, sometimes. So that's okay, I guess. I do understand that he's trying to be a better person. But what shitted me about it was that in order for this decision to happen, he apparently had to leave the room that the killer was in with Deborah so that they could have a private conversation about it, leaving the killer obviously time and room to escape, which was obviously going to happen as soon as they left the room. Why would they do that? It was just such a stupid moment. This wouldn't have happened had Dexter just killed him right there and then as well. And so when the killer does escape, it's totally Dexter's own fault. He should have just killed him right then and there. But he escapes and Dexter has left the premises because of the hurricane time constraint, and Deborah gets shot in the process, only for Dexter to return to the hospital to see her, as does Saxon, to finish her off, who gets arrested in the process when Angel and Quinn see him. Sometime around then, before or after, because Jesus Christ, this fucking episode, we get the news that after a seemingly successful surgery that Deborah has developed a blood clot in her brain, essentially rendering her brain dead, which is just an insult to the character, to be honest. And it was at that point that I think that the fans got super pissed. Dexter then goes to kill Saxon publicly while he's in a holding cell at Miami Metro. It's caught on tape, but Quinn and Batista let him off with a self-defense explanation when they both really knew the truth. But they were okay with it because the dude killed Deborah. They didn't know that Dexter was a serial killer, but they knew that Dexter probably was getting some revenge here. Dexter then once again returns to the hospital, kills Deb in an insultingly hopeless way by just pulling her life support plug, which I honestly also just, by the way, don't think he had to do. Like, I know it's fictional and TV and whatever, and it would have just been one hell of an ex-machina just to cure her instantly and have Deb just be back and whatever. But I do feel like he could have waited and just saw how she was, you know? Wait a few days, wait a few weeks or something, see if she's improving at all. I know that it was unlikely, she was basically brain dead and whatever, but miracles happen! Wait, give Deb a chance, dude! Anyway, after killing Deb and dumping her body in the ocean, which I also think was a bit unfair to Deb in terms of being robbed of a proper burial ceremony with her friends and whatnot, but I can get behind the decision because it's more metaphorical, okay? He does it under his own terms and is heartbroken and respectful and deeply regrets that his own actions are really what caused this. See, the show tells us time and time again that he is a threat to those around him, that having loved ones while leading the life that he does is a bad combination, and we see many times as to why. Loved ones of his are constantly in danger, whether knowingly or not, and those closest to him tend to eventually die in the end. Dexter, the neat monster that he is, tries the whole series to lead this balanced life between the two sides of him, and ultimately decides that in the end, this was a selfish lifestyle, and that it just can't be resumed. So, he drops Deborah off into the ocean and fucks off into the eye of the storm to either kill himself or to knowingly fake his own death. It's not exactly clear, I'm not sure which, but he does survive. What I think kind of sucks about Dexter's suicide/escape plan is that in the end, he leaves his son Harrison off with a known serial killer in Hannah. Look, now, I don't think Hannah is going to kill Harrison, okay? I think at this point, Dexter can trust her. Despite being a killer of some, she really only picks specific targets, much like Dexter himself. So it'd be kind of hypocritical to say that it works for Dexter but doesn't for her. But I will say that the decision to kill himself, whether in actuality or to fake his death, is wildly out of character when we consider that Dexter would never, Dexter would never abandon Harrison. Dexter would never abandon his son. Not in a million years. Harrison has been around for half the series up until this point, and is easily one of the reasons Dexter questions his own morals so much throughout the series from his conception in season 3 and onwards. Dexter doesn't want to corrupt Harrison, and I can see why he'd think distancing himself would make sense in a way. But the whole series has shown that despite Dexter's own urges to kill, that deep down there is room for him to love. Whether that's morally okay to support as a viewer or an outsider is really an entirely different question. What I'm saying is that in the hands of Dexter, Harrison always had somebody to care for him. Even if he did toss him around back and forth from babysitters to friends at any chance he could get so he could fuck off and kill somebody. I will admit he did that quite a lot, but still, Dexter clearly loves Harrison. I buy that there is a version of this situation where in his self-loathing, Dexter decides his own absence is what is best for those around him. But I just don't think that this was the optimal way to do it. In the end, I don't hate the decisions. I just don't think all of the details felt absolutely perfect in a show that otherwise has, in my opinion, many perfect elements. I just think that Dexter deciding to off himself now because of the brain surgeon and everything really doesn't make that much sense when his just decided that, yeah, his family was in danger before with other killers, but that was okay and he continued. But now with this one, it's apparently so different and now he has to abandon his son. I don't know, maybe it's the fact that Deborah died and that was fucking his decisions up as well, but it just felt inconsistent. I still love Dexter as a show. I think that as a series as a whole, even including the finale, Dexter is an absolute knockout. I was gripped, I was taken back, I was enthralled. Dexter had my attention and had my curiosity, and I watched it all in a matter of weeks because it's just that good. I don't think that the ending of the show ruined the whole thing. I think that if you're a big fan of the show and everything, and you say that the ending totally ruined, in retrospect, everything that came before it, that you're exaggerating. The early seasons are still there to enjoy. Whether you love or hate the last season, I don't think it changes those earlier seasons. And if it does for you, I'm sorry, I guess. That's not your fault, but I'm sorry. Because I absolutely still love Dexter as a show so much. And it's one that I will absolutely be rewatching in the future. Probably multiple times. Dexter was always a show to divide its audiences, and it always had us questioning whether what its characters or even in real life writers were doing within the show was the right way to go. Like, should Dexter have gone left or right on any given corner? Should the writers have explored different themes or went down different certain directions differently? Maybe, but it is what it is, and I love it for what it is. Should the writers have included the weird plotline where Deborah is apparently attracted to her brother for a couple episodes that didn't lead anywhere anyway? Well, no, definitely not. But that's okay, we can ignore that. Don't worry about it. Season 8 does make me overthink everything though. In the end, what did the show believe about Dexter as a man? Because he technically gets away with it all, but he doesn't get to keep his life as is. But the only reason anything really went wrong was because he chose not to kill someone. As was the cause of Rita's death seasons ago as well. It seems as though that life is teaching Dexter to kill people. Otherwise they'll come back to get him if they know his identity. While concurrently Dexter decides to distance himself from everyone. I think that there's a certain sense of tragedy, as is a certain hypocrisy in it all. I think the show explored fantastic themes regarding the monster within Dexter, but it didn't quite tackle the end-all be-all question of where does a man like this end up. In a show that focuses on the details and cause and effect, it weirdly haphazardly cops out in committing to a side in its final moments. But that's kind of the beauty of the upcoming New Blood miniseries that's coming out soon. I guess time will tell on how that handles these open-ended questions, and I truly can't wait to find out what it has to say. New Blood, by the way, takes Dexter in a completely different direction, with a whole new setting in the snow and everything, with a total new set of characters to interact with, and a 10-year history gap to fill. I can't wait to find out what has happened and what will happen. The show premieres on November 7, 2021 on Paramount+, and will release weekly episodes till the 9th of January 2022. I'm a bit sad I won't be able to binge it because of that, like I did the whole original series, but my god, I'm excited as hell. And so that is Dexter. I love most of it. There are elements to it that I really don't like all that much and have things to complain about, sure. But in the end, I thought that this was a great show and I'm glad that I watched it. Let me know what you think about the ending. I guess with our knowledge now that a new series is coming out, that might change some people's opinions. I'm curious if that's the case, and let me know. Let me know what you think about it, and if you're looking forward to New Blood, or if you think they should just leave it alone. It's finished and whatever, who cares? That might be some people's opinions. I don't know. I'm stoked. I can't fucking wait. And I will definitely be watching on November. What date did I say? 7. Okay, cool. That's all. Do the things, please, which are, of course, like and comment and share and subscribe. And you can take off your Hawaiian shirt because I'm in Melbourne, not Miami. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.